What's going on, guys? Josh here, Traxxas, and in today's video I'm going to be adding an upgrade on the 1/16 E-REVO that should have been done a long time ago. So if you guys recall with some of the recent videos I made with this thing, the common issue that goes wrong with this RC is that happens very often, and the reason being is the pivot balls right here. And the issue itself isn't the pivot ball, it's more the design of how it pops into the hub. It could easily pop out, and then what happens is the plastic, because these hubs are plastic, the plastic cracks, so then you just get something like this where you can pull it in and out really easily, and then it just flops around everywhere, and it makes driving very difficult because you can't really use it like this, because each landing, like if your tire lands like this, it just pops out again. So in today's video, I'm going to be solving that problem with the Atomik RC aluminum axle carriers. And they say that they're for the front. I ordered the rear. I think they're still the same thing though. But the main issue is the rear ones I've noticed. The front doesn't really have that issue. So the first thing that we need to do to install these is obviously first take off the body, and then we're going to need to remove the rear tires. And I'm only going to show you guys how to do one side because it's the same process for the other side. But as you can see here, now that the wheel is off, you can see where the plastic is cracked. If I just pull down on that hub a little bit, you can see it's just cracked all the way down the center of it. So yeah, that's definitely the culprit there. So the next thing that we need to do is grab a flathead screwdriver and pry off the wheel hex right there. May have to go around it a few times just to get it completely unseated. Alright, now that that hex is off, we need to push out this pin. Make sure you don't lose that, that's pretty important. And then if yours is broke like mine, we can just pop that right out. And then you need to grab a 2mm wrench and loosen the pivot balls. And you have to make sure your suspension is straight for that, so then it all lines up. Otherwise the driver would just be spinning. Alright, I figured out regardless if your hub is broken and cracked like mine, you're gonna have to loosen the top one too, just because of the way it all fits together. But you want to do a little bit of the top one, a little bit of the bottom, and just go back and forth until both pivot balls are out. And to get one of the pivot balls all the way out, you may have to loosen the turnbuckle here too. Once the old hub is out, what you want to do is pull out the pivot balls right here. One of them is going to be easier than the other for me. I think just yanking on it with some pliers might do the trick. I wouldn't squeeze too hard on the threads just so you don't mess them up, but that did work. And now the last thing we need to do with the old one is just pop out the ball bearings, and there is one on each side. And that's everything we need to do with the old one. Comparing it to the aluminum one, they're the same design, besides one's metal, one's plastic, and this one is not going to crack like this one, which is why I think it's going to be a very viable upgrade for most people, including myself, who is pretty tired of having these things crack. Every time I've drove this thing so far, I've had one break, and I'm kind of tired of just putting the plastic one back in. So this one is going straight in the garbage, but the other side is still good, so I'm going to be able to use that one as a spare if necessary. But the way these new ones work is you can't just put the pivot ball in from the back side like you would with the plastic ones. You actually have to go through the top there, and then there are these included, I don't know what they're called, but basically you take your wrench that is also included, put it right there, and then there's the threads, there's an O-ring, so then the whole thing doesn't back out, so you do not need to put Loctite on this. And then of course there's that nylon piece right there that would touch the pivot ball and hold everything in place. And it's also a ball shape. It's kind of like cupped in there, so it's going to sit nicely on the pivot ball. But basically this whole thing just threads right into there. And then you just do that until it's all nice and tight, but not too tight because you still want the pivot ball to move. So I tighten it down a little bit. It still moves freely, so we could go a little bit more. I tighten it down more, and it still moves, but it's a little rough around the edges, so we're going to back it off just a little bit, and that's perfect right there. So we're going to leave it at that. And there's also not a lot of play back and forth, which is good. And we're going to do the same process on the bottom. Slide the pivot ball in, grab one of these pieces, and tighten it down until it's just tight enough to hold everything in place, but not too tight to where it can't move around. So next we're going to take our bearings. One goes on the inside there. Make sure you push them in all the way. And the other one goes on the outside. And that's what the completely assembled hub looks like. We got both bearings right here. Of course, the pivot balls with the threads poking out the back, and then the two nuts right there holding everything in place. and everything moves nice and freely. There's no binding whatsoever. So now we're ready to put this back in the truck. The first thing that we're gonna do is install the drive shaft. So you just take the hub, slide it right through the stub axle just like that. And now is also a good time to put the little pin in right here. We're just gonna slide that through the hole in the stub axle, followed by our wheel hex. And you have to make sure the straight edge in there is lined up with the pin that we just put in. Just press everything together. So now we can tighten down each pivot ball. We're gonna take our 2mm wrench, make sure everything is nice and straight so then it could sit in there nice. Because if the pivot ball is sitting at like a 45-degree angle, you can't tighten anything down, whereas if it's straight, you could actually tighten it. And if your drive shaft pops out, you just pop it back in. There are 2 marks that you need to line everything up with. There's like indentations on the drive shaft itself, and I believe it can only go in one way. So if it's really tough to put in, just turn it and it'll go right in. Now when tightening pivot balls, you don't want to crank down on one until it's all the way in and then move on to the second, because you're not going to be able to get to the second because it's going to be at a weird angle. Basically, going to look like that, and then you're going to try to tighten it down and you're not going to be able to get to the head of the pivot ball. So you just start them a little bit and then you do a little bit at a time until it's all the way in. But you actually don't put the pivot balls all the way in the A-arm. So what I like to do is I'll start with the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, go to the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're going to repeat that process until there's no more threads showing. As you can see here, there's threads right there still showing, and you're basically going to want to stop when you hit that line where there's just the bare metal right there. So I just finished tightening everything down, and as you can see, there's no threads. And when tightening down, you may have to hold the suspension arm up so then everything is nice and parallel, so then you can get to the actual head of the pivot ball. But now that the actual hub is installed, we need to reconnect the turnbuckle. And if you have the stock plastic pivot balls that sit in the turnbuckle, make sure you put them in again, because they like to just fall out just like that. It's just normal use. They get wore down and then tolerances are really loose, so just make sure you don't lose it and you put it in along with the screw. So with the pivot ball in the turnbuckle, you're just going to want to slide it into the space right there, make sure it's all lined up, and then we're gonna put Loctite on this screw. Just the blue thread locker is gonna be perfect for this, and a little bit goes a long way. You see I don't have that much on it. Now we're just gonna line everything up and tighten it down. So now that we got the rear link connected, we need to reinstall the tire, and that's as simple as making sure, this is something I like to do with all my tires. I like to get a little bit of thread locker, same kind we put on that screw. Put a little bit on the stub axle. It just holds the wheel nut on better. Even though I have serrated wheel nuts, those do grip into the plastic of the rim, but I just like that extra little bit of protection that the Loctite gives. We're gonna grab our wheel wrench and just tighten the wheel nut down, and then this side is done. And also be sure to line up the wheel hex with the hex that is in the center part of the rim. Otherwise, it's just going to spin on itself. And also sometimes with some RCs, I don't really know why it happens, but if you tighten down the wheel nut too much, it binds and doesn't move freely. So just back it off just a tad, not much, and it's already freed up a lot more. So I'm just going to do it a little bit more, and that's perfect right there. So we got one side done. Just a quick comparison, something I noticed here on the bench, there's not a lot of movement up and down like this anymore. If you look at this side, which still has the plastic hub, it has a lot of movement left and right like that. But if you look at this side, there's really nothing. Yes, there is still the back and forth movement on this axis. We'll call that the Y-axis, but there's not a lot of movement on the X-axis like this. So yeah, if I get aluminum arms for this, or even just stainless steel pivot balls for in the actual links, that will go a long way to help eliminating some of that wheel wobble that I'm experiencing. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side off camera. Alright, so the new rear hubs are all installed on the 1/16 E-REVO, and overall I'm really excited for this upgrade. I think it's going to be a great addition to this RC. I'm not going to have any more issues with the rear hubs popping out and then cracking. It just got very annoying with those stock plastic ones. I'm also pretty excited that it tightened up the movement a lot. Yeah, I'll be sure to put a link to this product down below in the description, because I don't think this upgrade is known to a lot of people. I haven't really seen it all too much. I just noticed that I kept breaking the stock plastic ones. I looked up to see if there are any aluminum options, and there were, and it's even better that there were some in red to match our theme with this RC, with the red body, the red RPM arms that we just installed in this video. And yeah, overall this RC has come a long way. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something from it if you do have a 1/16 E-REVO or a 1/16 Summit or a Slash for that matter. I hope you found value in this video, and if you guys did, leave it a like, share with others so I can grow my channel. And there is a new basher coming soon. If you guys haven't already seen it, I've teased it a ton on the community tab, but I am so excited for that content. It's starting to ship here in 2 days. I'm not telling you what day I'm filming this because then you would all know what car I'm getting, but it's shipping soon, so I'm really excited to get it. And yeah, I hope that you guys are excited for that content as well. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video on Trax RC. Aside from my soul.